All right, welcome everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling something super important in ISO 22301.
Yeah, definitely key stuff. We're looking at Clause 7, the one all about support for your BCMS.
That's Business Continuity Management System for anyone just joining us.
Right, and it's basically like, think of building a house. You've got your plans, right? But you need a solid foundation first.
Makes sense. So we're not just talking about the business continuity plans themselves, but what makes them actually work in the real world.
Exactly. And that's what Clause 7 is all about. It's about those foundational resources and processes that your BCMS needs to really function well. We'll unpack it all step by step.
Awesome. So let's jump right in. First up is 7.1 resources. Seems pretty straightforward at first glance, right? You need things to make things happen.
Yeah, but it's more than just that. The standard really emphasizes the necessity of providing those resources for every stage of your BCMS, setting it up, implementing it, keeping it going, and even improving it all the time.
Right, because business continuity is an ongoing thing, not a one-time project.
Exactly. And when they say resources, it's pretty broad. The standard breaks it down into some key areas. Human resources, for one. Got to have competent people dedicated to business continuity.
Yeah, people who know what they're doing. And then there's infrastructure, the buildings, equipment, all the physical stuff.
Right. And in this day and age, a huge part of that is technology. Your IT systems, your communication networks, all those critical software applications you rely on daily.
Absolutely. And you need those to be available, or at least have solid backup plans if your BCMS is going to work when it counts.
Yeah.
I remember reading about a hospital system that had a great disaster recovery plan for their servers,
Oh, yeah.
but they totally messed up on backup generators for the building.
Huh.
They almost had a huge issue during a power outage because of that.
Oof, that's rough. See, that's why this section is so crucial. And of course, we can't forget about financial resources.
Yeah, the money. It all costs money.
Implementing and maintaining a strong BCMS. That's training, resilient technologies, maybe even redundant systems. The standard basically requires organizations to actually allocate budget to this stuff.
Right. It's putting your money where your mouth is, basically,
Yeah.
and showing that you're actually serious about business continuity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, a really important point here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to resources.
It sense, right? Every organization is different.
Totally. The standard acknowledges that every organization operates in its own unique context. So the size of your company, the industry you're in, how complex your operations are, and the specific scope of your BCMS.
All of that influences what kind of resources and how much of them you'll need.
Exactly. A small startup needs way different things compared to a huge multinational corporation with a super complex supply chain, right?
Absolutely. You have to tailor your resource allocation to your specific situation and the risks you face. So, with resources covered, let's move on to 7.2, competence.
All right, competence. This is all about making sure you've got the right people in the right roles and that they have the skills and knowledge to do their part in the BCMS.
Right. It's not just about having warm bodies filling the spots. They got to know what they're doing.
Exactly. The standard defines competence as the demonstrated ability to apply knowledge and skills to get things done. So, for your BCMS, that means people who not only get the basics of business continuity, but also have specific knowledge related to their role.
So they can actually carry out the procedures when things hit the fan.
Precisely. Now, the standard says organizations need to determine the necessary competence for anyone doing work under their control that affects the BCMS.
That's an interesting phrase. Under the organization's control. So it's not just your employees, right?
No, it could also include contractors, key suppliers, any external party involved in your business continuity setup, anyone who has a role to play.
So you have to figure out the level of competence needed for all these different roles. But then what?
Well, then the organization has to ensure those people actually have that competence. The standard mentions a few ways to do that. Formal education, targeted training, or even making sure they have relevant prior experience.
Got it. So it's not just about filling a position. You got to verify that the person has the knowledge and skills for their BCMS role.
Right. And if they're missing something, you need to provide a way for them to get up to speed. And this isn't just a one-time thing. Competence needs to be maintained and, ideally, improved over time.
Yeah. Things change, new technologies pop up, and new threats emerge. Got to keep up.
Exactly. So that could involve refresher training, opportunities for professional development in business continuity, or even cross-training within teams.
Right. And the standard also mentions something super important. Documented information. as evidence of competence.
Oh, that's crucial. You need records of training, qualifications, experience, things that prove your people have the necessary skills.
Imagine trying to reassure everyone after a disruption, and you can't even show that your response team was properly trained.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Documented evidence is key here. It shows accountability and helps with continuous improvement.
Right, because if something goes wrong during a real disruption, you want to be able to look back and see that everyone was actually prepared. So, listeners, take a look at your BCMS roles and make sure that people filling them are truly equipped for the job.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears to 7.3, awareness. We've talked about resources, competent people, but do they actually understand why business continuity matters?
And what their role is in making it all work.
Exactly. That's what awareness is all about, making sure everyone working under the organization who can affect the BCMS gets the big picture.
They need to be aware of the organization's business continuity policy, the big statement about commitment to resilience.
Right. But it goes beyond that. They need to know the specific documented information related to their responsibilities, the procedures they need to follow, contact lists, escalation protocols, all that stuff.
So they're not just vaguely aware that a policy exists, they actually know the details relevant to them.
Precisely. And even more importantly, they need to understand how their everyday work contributes to the effectiveness of the BCMS and how their actions during a disruption can make or break
It's
things.
showing them how they fit into the puzzle, right?
Exactly. That's crucial for getting everyone on board and creating a shared sense of responsibility. And on the flip side, they need to be aware of the consequences if they don't follow the rules.
Yeah. What are the risks to the organization if procedures are ignored or responsibilities are taken lightly during a crisis?
Right. It's all about building a culture of business continuity where everyone understands their role and why it matters, not just treating it like a dusty old document nobody cares about.
And that's something for you listeners to think about, too. How well is business continuity understood at all levels of your organization?
Good point. Now let's move on to 7.4, communication. It's often said that clear and timely communication is key in any situation, and that goes double for business continuity.
Definitely. You don't want to be scrambling to figure out who to tell what when things are going haywire.
This section of the standard really emphasizes the need for organizations to figure out all their communication requirements in advance, both internally and externally.
So what specific things does the standard want us to think about in terms of communication planning?
Well, first, you got to determine what information needs to be communicated,
All right, what do people need to know?
like initial alerts about a potential disruption, the activation of business continuity plans, status updates, recovery efforts, the whole 9 yards.
And then there's the question of when to communicate. Proactively, immediately, regularly throughout the disruption.
Probably all of the above, honestly. And then there's who you need to communicate with.
Right, internally and externally. Different people need different information.
Exactly. Internally, it could be different teams, senior management, all employees, depends on the situation. Externally, it could be customers, suppliers, regulators, the media, who knows.
And how you communicate is also super important. Email, phone calls, text messages, social media, dedicated platforms. Got to have those channels established and tested beforehand.
For sure. And finally, to avoid confusion and mixed messages, you need to define who's responsible for each communication. Clear roles and responsibilities are key here.
Makes sense. If everyone knows who's in charge of what, it'll run much smoother.
Exactly. Communication can make or break your response to a disruption. Good communication can calm things down and help you recover faster. Bad communication just makes everything worse.
Couldn't agree more. All right, last but not least, we've got 7.5, documented information. Now, I know this might not sound like the most exciting topic,
Yeah, it doesn't exactly scream thrills.
but trust me, it's crucial. Think of it like the backbone of your BCMS, providing structure, clarity, and consistency.
It really is foundational. The standard defines documented information pretty broadly. It's any information that your organization needs to control and maintain, and that can be anything from paper documents to electronic files, internal or external sources.
So it's more than just having a written business continuity plan, right?
Yeah.
It's all the information that supports the whole system.
Mm.
And the standard even categorizes it to make it clearer.
Right. First, there's documented information about the management system itself. Your BCMS policy, the scope, descriptions of your key processes, how everything connects.
So like the high-level overview of your BCMS, and then there's documented information created for operation.
Exactly. This is where your specific business continuity plans live. Your recovery procedures, step-by-step instructions, contact lists, all that practical stuff.
And the third category is evidence of results achieved, also known as records. Training records, audit reports, minutes from meetings, documentation of tests and exercises.
You got it. And all this documented information serves some important purposes. Firstly, it clarifies how the BCMS is supposed to work. Everyone's on the same page.
Right, so there's no confusion about who does what and how things should be done.
Exactly. Secondly, it helps ensure consistency across the organization. Everyone follows the same procedures. And thirdly, those records, the evidence of results, prove that your system is actually working and meeting the requirements of the standard.
Makes sense. You need that proof, especially when audits come around. Now, the standard also has some specific requirements for creating and updating this documented information.
Yeah, got to do it right. First, it needs to be properly identified and described. So what is it? What's its purpose? Who's responsible for it? All that good stuff.
Makes sense. Got to keep things organized.
Exactly. Then it needs to be in a suitable format and on an appropriate media, whatever makes it most accessible and usable for the people who need it. And it needs to be reviewed and approved by the right people to ensure its accuracy and relevance.
Right. You don't want people using outdated or incorrect information, especially during a crisis.
Agreed. And then there's the whole aspect of controlling this documented information, making sure it's available and suitable for use when and where it's needed. That means thinking about version control, secure storage, and how people can access it even if normal systems are down.
Yeah, imagine trying to find that emergency contact list when your network is down and everything is chaos.
Exactly. Accessibility is key. And of course, security is super important too. You got to protect sensitive information like recovery plans and vulnerability assessments from unauthorized access, loss, or tampering.
Keep those crown jewels safe.
And finally, the standard mentions having clear rules for retention and disposition of documented information. How long do you keep different types of records, and how do you securely dispose of them when you don't need them anymore?
Makes sense. Got to stay organized and compliant.
Exactly. So for you listeners, well-managed documented information is really about clarity and consistency for your business continuity efforts. It's your roadmap, your instructions, and your history of building resilience.
Awesome. So to quickly recap Clause 7, we covered the 5 key support areas: resources, competence, awareness, communication, and documented information. These are the pillars that hold up your BCMS.
They really are. Without these in place, even the best business continuity plans can fail when you need them most.
So, listeners, think about your own BCMS. Which of these 5 areas is most critical for your organization? Where are your weak points? What can you do to strengthen them?
Those are great questions to ask yourself. And if you want to dive deeper into this and learn even more about building a truly resilient organization, check out the full ISO 22301 standard.
It's the ultimate guide to business continuity best practices.
Absolutely.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Clause 7. Hope you all found it helpful. Until next time, stay resilient.
See you next time.